Hi there, Brian here. I'm the founder of Clarity Flow, and today I'm talking to coach and writer Rob Hatch. We had a great conversation. I had to kind of hold myself back from turning it into a coaching session for myself. That's just how easy Rob is to talk to about all things business, strategy, focus, decision making. We covered it all, and Rob has covered quite a bit of ground in his career span of being a coach for entrepreneurs as well as large organizations. Also, in teaching courses and running communities. So yeah, we really covered a lot of ground with Rob. We covered that separation and the differences between one-to-one small entrepreneur, business owner, small business coaching, and what he also spends a lot of time now doing in working with larger organizations, executives within organizations, and the different dynamics at play there. We had an interesting chat about some more recent trends with larger organizations investing in growth and coaching for their employees. And then we got into really the craft of coaching. And this is where I like to learn a lot about what it's like to be a coach, right? So how Rob asks the right questions. One of them that really stuck out to me, he likes to ask, is this a thing? And how he talked about the client knows their business best, and it's his work as a coach to kind of pull out like what are the most important parts to focus on. And we talked about how Rob writes a weekly newsletter to thousands of folks. He's been doing it for many years now, and that's a primary tool and craft that he focuses on to let new people build trust with him over time. And then we got a little bit into the process and structure of Rob's coaching business and how he has restructured it over the years with the goal of adding some consistency for his business, for his personal workflow, and all of that. Lots of good stuff here, a lot of interesting nuggets. I hope you enjoy it. Here is my chat with Rob Hatch. Rob Hatch, great to connect with you again. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Brian. How are you?
Doing great. Yeah, so we connected several months back,
Yes.
and I've learned all about your work as a coach and the different programs and practice that you've been running for years, and I think it'd be really great to get into it today.
Sounds good.
So, for those who don't know, the way that I've been trying to introduce new people on this podcast, of course, I could do the typical like, well, just tell me what you and your business do, but I'd like to hear it a little bit more from the perspective of maybe a recent client or one or two clients. Who are they? Not literally their name, but like what do they do, and how do they engage with you? What's like a typical example of that?
Uh, that is always an interesting question, but I appreciate being asked because recently I sat down and kind of listed out all the different industries that I've worked in, and it's at 75, and I know that there's more in terms of the clients that I've served. But there's the common theme is that they are primarily uh, small business owners, and by small I mean they might have a team of, you know, 10 to 50, or they could just be solopreneurs running their own shop and outsourcing everything. That varies, but really the owners and then the other side or another aspect of it is just leaders and executives within an organization who are
Hmm.
looking to kind of get a handle on all the things that come at them in a given day and all the decisions that they have to make. I had a recent client come to me with the goal of career advancement, so we mapped out. Really, it wasn't a clear map, but we talked about what that would look like, and just gathered all the information that we would need in terms of the elements and who they're working with and for, and then started a path to achieve that. And we were fortunate enough that it did. It worked,
That's
uh,
awesome.
which doesn't always happen, but it's one of those things where you're like, that was great. That was a good win.
So, are you primarily working with business owners or like executives at companies, or a mix of both, it sounds like?
It's a mix of both. So the people who have traditionally come to me have been business owners themselves coming to me directly and looking for help, because a lot of times, even though they might have a team, a small team, they're doing most of it. As you know, it's so many hats, so many demands on your time. It becomes overwhelming in the sense of, how do I make a decision? What thing I should focus on? Because a lot of entrepreneurs and small business owners are sort of, they're clever and they've got tons of ideas and there's lots of ways to make money. The question is, how do we focus on the ones that, that our clients need, that are meaningful to us? But
Yeah.
I've worked with folks who, they can make money 10 different ways, but we have to kind of pick a few and narrow it down. So I
Yeah, I
work with
mean,
them
you
on
are
that.
speaking to my core
Yeah,
ongoing pain point
it,
as a
it's
business owner, for sure.
it's so hard, and I think oftentimes, I don't care if you're in a large organization or a business owner, being at the top, being an executive, even if you're an executive over a division, it's lonely work. Even
Hmm.
if you have a supporting cast. But when it comes to thinking through, taking the time to stop and think through the decisions that you're making on a weekly basis or monthly basis, whatever that might be, is really hard but useful to do. And to have a partner to kind of vet those decisions through or think through those decisions. And that's how I see my role, is as a supporting cast, to kind of listen. And I I actually do a lot of my coaching not on video but just audio. My brain is, I'm
Hmm.
an auditory processor. So
Yeah,
as I'm
I hear
listening,
that a lot from many coaches, kind of
yeah,
using just audio only. Yep.
and I just, for whatever reason, I feel like I can tap into the nuances of what's being said, the sounds, um, the inflections and changes in tone. And I also will like grab onto something that they said, 5 minutes in, and I'll just hold it there somewhere. And then a few minutes later, they're going to say something else that makes me think, oh, that could be a thing. And they say a third thing, and I might string them together and present it
Yep.
to them and say, hey, this seems like a thing. Is this a thing? And a lot of times, yeah, the answer is yes, it's a thing. Uh, but the other part of it is, I also say to them, sometimes I'm going to show you that, and you're going to say, no, that's not a thing, and we'll move on,
Hmm.
and that's fine too. But to be able to take all of the mess that's in our brains, talk it out. Sometimes we even catch ourselves, but to have someone who can kind of hold those pieces and tie them together and say, does this make sense? Because it seems like you're saying this,
Yep.
is just super helpful. And then we can start to plan once we have an agreement.
Totally.
So
Totally. Just to kind of touch on the audio only thing again,
mhm.
it's interesting that you brought that up. I mean, it is a pattern that I see with a lot of coaches and their clients, really using just the audio only options on tools and things like that. I have definitely noticed it myself, like in recording podcasts. This one we happen to be recording on both video and audio, but I've done other podcasts where it's just purely audio and we like intentionally turn off the video. Sometimes just to save bandwidth and all that. But
Yeah,
there is like another level of clarity when you just don't even need to worry about the video side
right.
of it, and it's like I don't care about how I look or how my facial expressions, but and it sort of opens up a new level of clarity to just say and listen to what's being said, right?
Well, for me, it's also, I know that for years we've been told that so much of communication is nonverbal, right? And that has just, it's almost a heavy weight for me to bear, because then I'm kind of splitting my attention between what's being said and the body language a little bit. So it forces
Mm-hmm.
my brain to focus on two separate things almost.
Yep.
And so to be able to just listen, uh, and I'm also someone who, less so now, but often I will be pacing, like walking around listening,
Mm-hmm.
because that movement like frees my mind. I'm not paying attention to a screen. I'm up and I'm free of any distraction, just walking,
Yep.
and allows me to kind of really focus on the person.
It's great. All right, so before we really dive back into the journey, just as in terms of like introduction here, How do you sort of like in terms of like branding yourself and your services? Of course, you have your website robhatch.com,
Hmm.
and then there's owner media
Yep.
owner.media.
Yep.
What's like the interplay between those two, and what's like the landscape of your business today?
So Owner Media or Owner Media Group started as a collaboration with a business partner and friend named Chris Brogan about, well, almost 12 years now. And we used to sell webinars and courses back in 2011 and 12. We were selling and creating courses for sale. We actually got flack for it. We're so early on the idea of selling knowledge for money online.
Mm-hmm.
We actually got people complaining. So that's how far
Yeah,
back
I
we were
sort of
selling.
remember I do remember those days where it was starting to become really popular to have like online courses. I guess you're 2011, a little bit before the big wave
Yes, yeah.
of courses. And yeah, early on there's a lot more skepticism
There
back then.
really was, and now of course everyone's doing it. But we sold webinars and courses for years and years, and Chris did a lot of speaking. He's an author, New York Times bestselling author, and so we had a newsletter together, which was the for that business gave us probably 80+% of our revenue was from this newsletter.
Mm.
And he wrote every week on Sunday, and I write still to this day, 12 years later, every week on Thursday. So I've put out a newsletter every week, and that has been up until quite recently the primary source of all my inquiries and referrals and things like that. So
Mm.
that uh, Chris and I recently have wound down Owner Media to essentially a mastermind group now. All the courses and webinars are still available. And so we have a really great and strong mastermind group called Insiders. And I still run that, but I've shifted most of my focus over to coaching, which is why robhatch.com exists. And so there's an interplay there, but I still write the newsletter every week.
Yeah.
Goes out to roughly 10,000 people or so. And you know, I still kind of can't believe I've been doing it every single week for
Yeah.
12 years. It's kind of insane.
That's great. Actually, that was one of my next questions is how do new clients initially find you? And of course, when you're talking about a client coach relationship, there has to be probably a period of time and a lot of trust built up over that time. It sounds like your newsletter and your writings is the first exposure that like a new client would get to meeting you,
Yes,
right?
absolutely. But most recently, I've been getting a lot of referrals from
Mm-hmm.
prior clients. So there's a trust factor there, which is wonderful. When I pick up the
Mm-hmm.
phone and they'll tell me, oh, I'm calling you because of so and so that
Yeah.
you coached, or even if I haven't coached them, they just happen to know me through the newsletter, which is that's even more fun. Like if it's just someone who's been reading my writing for years and refers a
Mm-hmm.
friend to who's looking for a coach. And
Right.
and the other is I'm taking on some bigger clients. I'm working with companies right now that are a little lot larger than just the small businesses, and
Uh-huh.
coaching executives inside those organizations, particularly new executives as they ascend and take on new leadership roles within an organization. And I'm doing that kind of in partnership with a friend who runs an agency
Okay.
and does a lot of training. So I'm a referral. He refers them to me basically.
Got it. Got it. And in those situations, so on like the larger organization side
Mhm.
of your work, is your engagement with the
It
organization
is.
and then they assign you to their people,
Yeah.
or is it like individual people who want to kind of work privately to ascend up the ladder, if
I've
you will?
done both. So the one client I was referring to earlier was an individual coming to me. They had read my newsletter for years, and but they operate inside a very large organization, and they
Mm-hmm.
were, and oversee a department, and they were looking to kind of ascend
Yeah.
uh, through their organization. So that was an individual paid by them directly, and but the newer clients, I'm actually coaching seven individuals inside this organization
Mm-hmm.
who've all been recently promoted to new roles, and so there's a sort of change going on in this organization, and
Interesting.
that's been really really fun as well because it gets into you start to understand the culture of this organization
Uh-huh.
a lot more just through the lens of those people. And I am hired by the organization, but obviously all of those conversations are, you know, private, and I don't share any individual information. But what I do share with the owners is kind of themes that I see coming up that are common across the board to say this is something that
Mm-hmm.
I think you should pay attention to, and so uh, that can turn into additional, coaching actually with the owners to think about
Yeah.
what how do we address those things.
Super interesting. It must be it almost feels like a completely different practice and approach to coaching than on like individual small business situations. But then at the same time, there must be human elements that are just true across the
It
board
is
with everyone.
always that, and I was talking to another friend who recently who has worked with hundreds of organizations worldwide. She specializes in remote work and distributed workforces and has for 20 plus years. Wrote a book on it, and her, we were talking about the fact that a lot of these organizations feel like they're very special because the industry is so unique or the culture is so unique, but
Mm-hmm.
really, yeah, there's a language to learn. There's shorthand that you have to, get on board with. There's certain operational procedures that you have to understand. But that's easy to get up to speed on. And then it's the human stuff that is all that's the messy stuff. And it,
Yeah.
it's always about
Is this
people.
like a is this sort of a new trend in like larger companies, larger organizations investing in coaching for their employees?
I hope
Or
so.
is that
I hope so.
yeah.
I do think coaching is seeing a bit of a an uptick. I don't want to say renaissance, really. I mean, that feels like an overstatement, but there's an
Mm-hmm.
uptick in understanding its value. I've actually been working with another organization that's very carefully building an executive coaching, and training component to all of their new
Mm-hmm.
hires. They're in heavy acquisition mode, so there has to be this how do we get people on board with the new culture, and how do we train people and support people, and so they're taking their time with this, and executive coaching will be a big part of it.
Interesting. Yeah, and I guess also as you said, you sort of touched on it, it's also a way for the organization and the leaders to a way for them to listen to their people, especially as their teams are growing exponentially without having like maybe direct boss employee relationship and having more of a like there's like a level of privacy between the coach and
Yes,
executives, but you're still sharing themes and some and what's happening in the organization.
absolutely. And that becomes harder if you're just hired to work with one person, because then one, you can't verify that it's a common theme as a
Mm-hmm.
coach, and also the sharing, it's kind of obvious who it's coming from. So
Yeah.
so that becomes a little trickier. But I also think that there is, again, too early to say it's a trend, but there's the beginnings of acknowledgement that the type of leadership that's required has to include a coaching mindset to some degree, to a strong degree, I
Mm-hmm.
believe, and to think about uh, how do you even create this space for that kind of meeting with the people that you're supervising, where they can come in and reflect on what they did that week, what's going on for them, and help them make choices, anchored in what they do well, anchored in their strengths,
Yeah.
helping them make better decisions and growing. The challenge is the time. It's always the time. Everyone, you know, you really have to commit to, if someone's supervising 10 people, that's a lot of hours of
Mm-hmm.
support but I think in the context of the regular meetings that people have, they can find the time to shift it from just report outs to, how can I coach this person?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And you know, it does. I was listening to a different podcast the other day about what's sort of changed in our industry, but probably all industries in the last 10 years or so. And one of the things that they were bringing up, and I'm so disconnected from the large organization thing. I've got a small, a handful of people that I work with on Clarity Flow, but
Yep.
and I've been working on at this super small team level for my whole career, really. So I'm always sort of like fascinated with like how these like large organizations work. Um, but it seems to me like I at least I've heard these rumblings of like it's different. Like it hiring is more challenging today and retaining talent, and it's not just about the competition of like especially for like engineering talent or marketing talent, but also like you know people are they they value different things
Yes.
in their careers. It's not just salary. Now it's remote work. Now it's a growth opportunity, and also like what the company stands for and doesn't stand for, and things like that. So it seems like like a company investing in coaching, it's almost adding another uh, layer of benefits and like an attractive like growth mindset on a human level that a company can offer to attract talent.
Absolutely. Although I will say, so the organization that I said I was working with that's building this whole training platform and executive coaching will be a big part of that. They are taking a lot of time to do it, which is something that as a small business owner and entrepreneur, like I could launch something tomorrow and we could
Mm-hmm.
test it out and it, with courses like I've sold courses, um, you know, within a week of deciding that I think this is what the market needs, and Chris and I would put the course together, at least the framework and the first couple of episodes of it, and launch it,
Sure.
and you can just do stuff like that really fast. If it doesn't work, you move on. uh, but within an organization, it's harder to make these changes, and that's kind of frustrating. At the same time, I'm starting to respect the thoughtfulness. I do respect the thoughtfulness that they're employing here in making sure that it's all tied together, because to your point, there's a reactionary element to this staffing and attracting people, like, oh, we have this, we have this, we can do remote work. But what a lot of organizations sometimes don't do is think about the cultural implications of remote work. What do people need to be successful in this environment?
Mm-hmm.
It's one of my favorite questions. Is I think honestly, every person that's hired in any organization should be asked that question.
Right.
What tools do you need? What environment do you need? What support do you need to be successful? Um, and and then work to shape that. But I was on a webinar recently with another organization, and there were about 90 folks on there, and they have remote workers. But the challenges of that some of the employees were experiencing, some people were worried that if they didn't respond to communication instantly, that people would think that they weren't working.
Right.
So they had to demonstrate that they're always working. So all day long, instead of being able to focus on a project to completion or even a big chunk of time, any ding or buzz or anything that's coming in, they're stopping what they're doing and responding to that need. So they're constantly like churning through, and their attention is all over the place because they just feel this compulsion to demonstrate, I'm working, I'm working, I'm working. On the other
Right.
hand, there was another person on the call who was saying, I am constantly reaching out to people, and I get that I'm kind of interrupting them, but it's because I feel lonely and I don't have any
Mm.
support. So I want these little check-ins and little validations, and I need the check-ins. So that's two very different aspects of remote work, and thinking about how do we communicate within an organization. So for me, I can coach the individual there, but there also has to be some work at the level of the culture to understand. So how are we going to communicate here? Are we going to you know emails? Is it reasonable to respond to an email within 24 hours? We all
Mm-hmm.
have Teams or Slack channels or whatever. Slacks, do they need to be instantaneous, or can we have a block of time where someone just goes in and checks their Slack? And
Yeah, I mean, obviously you're touching on asynchronous, which is a huge focus for me and what we do with Clarity Flow. One of the early realizations that I had with it, even before I even knew what the product was going to be, but um, and I see this still every day, is that like it's with async, whether it's within an organization, a small team, a large team, or coaches and clients, it's like, yeah, it's a little bit more convenient. You can reduce like calendar events and meetings and especially with large orgs,
Yeah.
it's just like just way too many meetings about meetings, and nobody wants that. But what I did find was what everyone actually really wants is to communicate more. They want to use it as a tool to be able to ask questions, send responses, and still have a face-to-face or audio connection with their coworkers or their colleagues, without all the scheduling and but it's not a way to eliminate communication. It's actually in many ways a way for people to connect more, without the trade-offs of scheduling and focus and all that.
Yeah. At the same time, what it also allows, and the conversation that I think in a larger organization that they'd have to have is, what's the expectation for a response?
Mm-hmm.
And so when someone sends me something, it's easier for me, right? I tell my clients, if you need communication in between, here are the channels. You can use Clarity Flow, you can use email, whatever you want, but
Mm-hmm.
don't expect me to respond. I need a 24-hour kind of window to work it into my workflow, because one of the things that I do and the way that I set up my day is, I have a 2-hour block of time where I lock down, and there's nothing else that I'm doing other than the three things that I've determined are the most important for my business. And there's no communication that's going to get through during those times. Even if my wife calls me, we have a family rule that is, she's going to have to call me twice to tell me that's the bat signal, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So to interrupt whatever focus is going on,
Yeah.
I'm not going to let anything through. So I control my communication very tightly, but then I move and go intentionally into those channels to say, okay, now's my time to look, to respond, and it's filtered by, my clients or my wife or a business partner. So, and I'll go through each of those channels, the way that they're filtered, and devote time to responding then. But
Yeah.
I can't.
My family gets on me because I don't even look at my texts
Yeah.
during the workday. It's like I'll go hours without even seeing it.
Yeah.
Um,
And
and it ends up being like the door knock is the bat signal.
there you go. Whatever
Yeah.
works. But
Yep.
but I think it's hard to tune that out and to give permission, like in a larger organization, to say, what if you just
Mm-hmm.
turned all those notifications off for an hour,
Yeah.
2 hours, and then you went in after you were done, instead of
And I
trying to get it all done in between.
totally and I think that there's also an expectation, at least for me, but I found that, like, especially with my teammates, and we're almost entirely asynchronous. Um, Part of the value of it is like when I send a message, I don't want a response right away.
Right.
You know, the whole point is like I want to make sure that I send this question across to my teammate so that they can start thinking about it over the next 24 hours. Like that to me is productive. You know,
Mhm.
I'm not going to send a message to say, hey, can we have a meeting about this thing tomorrow? And then we're not even going to think about it until then. Like, no, I just want to make sure I ask the question. Now it's on their to-do list for the next business day,
Mhm.
and I know that like I'm going to get a response, and then I'll think about the response tomorrow or the next day whenever it comes in. But we can both still manage our priorities day to day. Hey, just a quick break to tell you about Clarity Flow. It's the software tool loved by coaches and their clients for communicating asynchronously in threaded conversations using video, audio, or text. My team and I designed Clarity Flow for the modern day coach. It lets you give clients a single place to engage with you and all that you offer through your coaching business. Run coaching groups, cohorts, and communities using our Spaces feature. Create interactive courses using our Programs feature. Build your coaching library with templates and reusable content. and sell access to your coaching programs with subscriptions or one-time payments. Customize colors and connect your domain to give clients a fully branded experience. You can use Clarity Flow on the web or our mobile apps for iPhone, iPad, or Android, and connect any other apps using our Zapier integration. Start with a free trial or request a personalized demo and consultation by going to clarityflow.com.
When you send those, I'm just curious if you send them kind of like, oh, I just got this idea. Let me turn on the video, shoot it, and send it out. Or is it more, do you let it sit for a while? Is it more thoughtful? Like, because I could see someone just sending, 10 of those over the wall
Right.
just to get it off their head. And that puts a lot of burden on the receiver. And so I'm just
Yeah,
curious.
it very much depends on the thing, whatever it is, right? I have gotten better about preparing more before I send something. So like in most cases, especially if it's a marketing project, and I'm talking to my marketing team member, it's probably something that I've thought a lot about. And what I also do a lot is I prepare notes, usually like a quick bullet list in Notion or something.
Yeah.
And I use that as my guide. I'll share my screen and my camera and record my message, and I'm talking through the bullet points. And the notes I've taken maybe a week or more to prepare and research. So, and that's actually how I even go back and forth in an ongoing meeting, if you will. And a meeting could last a week or it could last 4 months with a single person because it's a slow asynchronous meeting. For example, right now I'm working with a pay-per-click consultant, right? And he's running it, and I have questions, and we have like 10 or 15-minute videos back and forth to each other over the course of a month. And I'll watch back his response, and while I'm doing that, I'm just jotting down some notes. And then when I respond, I'm actually showing my notes, and I talk through them so that I stay focused on the thing. But yeah, if it's like a new project, a new task or something that I'm giving someone, I spend a lot of time worrying about and thinking about like what are the priorities in everybody's queue that I'm assigning.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
For it to raise to the level of like, okay, I'm going to put this into your queue, I've probably decided it's important.
Yeah, that's good. And the other side that you're just sort of piqued my interest on was the way in which you approach receiving that and devoting the time to say, okay, this is a 15-minute video. I'm going to take notes because this is an ongoing meeting. So viewing it as a meeting, viewing it as I'm not just going to play it and just watch it without having a way to capture that or just play it in the background as I'm writing other emails. Like it's a devoted, it's time for me to watch this video and give it all of my attention.
Yeah, absolutely. Just you can do this with like really any tool, but in terms of our tool and Clarity Flow, like we tell the person when the person is watching it.
Yep.
You could turn that off if you want. But one of the things that I really like about asynchronous in general is that it is all logged, right? So I can go back to the technical discussion that we had last week, and it's all in the thread. It's not like lost within a 60-minute Zoom call. How are we going to find whatever was said? So that's I think really important, and that's also where having notes actually really helps.
Yeah.
Because I'll also post the notes along with my video where I talked through it. Again, and that also speaks to a thing that I keep trying to communicate about asynchronous in general is that when you're in a live meeting, I have to have an answer to your question on the spot, right? Like you ask me something, I have to respond. Otherwise, it's just awkward or
right.
It's weird. Like with
How
the
does he not know
silence
the
and
answer to
everything.
that? Yeah.
Yeah. So, what that means is I'm just going to blurt out the first thing that comes to my mind, right? Which more times than not is not going to be the best idea or the best well-formed thought. But when it's async, I can take time to jot down some notes. I can do some research. I can take a walk and mull it over before I get back to them. And now it's a much more productive response that I'm coming back to. I could talk all day about that stuff.
No, it's really fascinating. So part of where I'm, you know, why it's got me thinking this way, and why I get fascinated by just communication, is because it centers around time and where we choose to focus our attention during the day. And as an entrepreneur, solo business owner, even in a larger organization, there's just so many demands. But one of the things that I like to do with folks is just start to say, like, communication is just one example, but how do you want this to work? Like, how do you want information to flow? What works for you?
Hmm.
Because I don't know many people who can deal with the onslaught all day long. So
Yeah.
helping them think about what works or what's worked in the past. It works really well when I have, you know, the notes along with the video so I can see what Brian's talking about. You know, that's super helpful for me. So, you know, you might change the way that you interact with someone you're working with to make sure that you're always providing, you provide them anyway.
Yeah.
But thinking about asking for those things or setting up our basic, the world, you know, through our screens that we operate in, based on what works for us, what's worked for us in the past, in the way that, whether that's supervision, whether that's how we accomplish a task or accomplish a, you know, completing a project. I like to go to people's prior success or the things that their strengths and what works for them, and then we take that and we can extrapolate and say, okay, so based on that, there's a framework that we can use to say,
Hmm.
can we apply it over here? You're trying to accomplish this goal. Is there a similar
Yeah.
goal that you've accomplished in the past? What did you do? How did you gather information? How do you like to research? Who do you talk to? Um, what steps do you usually go through in your planning process? How do you structure your time? And when people start taking control of that, especially if it's anchored in something they've succeeded at in the past, you know, I think the possibilities are endless. And so to me, I'm always looking for, what did you do well? What do you like it? What do you want it to look like? Forget,
Hmm.
you know, what's coming at you for a second. Let's just, can we structure it in a way that works for you?
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to like hold off on like talking about my own situation because I can go down so many rabbit holes there in terms of how we help myself and my team we stay productive with tasks and communication and stuff. But what I'm kind of curious to know is in your work with your clients, is that like this discussion that we're having now, is this sort of like the like what the content of your coaching looks like, or is it very different from each individual client? And I'm sure it is, but like, um, are you going? So like, what kind of subject matter are you covering? Is it like really wide across the board? Is it like productivity, workflow, focus? Is it like interpersonal stuff? Is it psychology? Like what
It's
are we?
all of the above.
All of it.
But I, you know, so the convenient sort of, sort of tag we can put on it, I think, is around decision making.
Mm-hmm.
And because there are so many decisions, and that's sort of at the crux of, you know, are we making a good decision or a bad decision, or you know, where, and from how you focus your time to what you choose to say to people, to how you respond to a situation, the decisions you make as you grow your business, who you hire, all of that is around just taking the time and the space to think through, what is it that I'm trying to accomplish? What information do I need to gather to make a decision confidently? Where does that information live? You know, that's sort of one framework. I worked with a client who wanted to purchase a franchise. I'd never done that ever.
Mm-hmm.
Coached anyone in that. I hadn't been through that process, and I was very candid that this is not an experience I have. But what I can do is help you think through what you need to know, where you need to get it, so that when you get that information, you are really clear that the next decision you're going to make is confident, whether or not you
Mm-hmm.
rule them out or rule them in and take the next step forward. And
Yep.
that's for me everything. But it does get into, I just had a call with one of those executives where it really was about productivity and how they structured their time, because they were completely and utterly overwhelmed and could not see their way clear to having any time to work on the stuff that was important to them. They were just constantly responding to the needs of others.
Mm.
And one example I gave them was, look, you just found an hour of time to talk to me. We can
Right.
find an hour of time in a week. Maybe we can even find two of those. And oftentimes clients will, shoot really high. Like, what if I just for 2 days a week or every day? I'm like, I always slow people down. I'm not an everyday kind of person. I'm a more
Man,
often
you're
than
just
not.
describing all of my habits. You're
Right.
like,
So,
oh, what if I just lock myself in a room and build that feature for a
right.
week? You know,
And I
like,
just do it every day for 3 hours and I'm like,
yep,
every day is not going to work. Stuff happens more often
yep,
than not, maybe a couple times a week so that if you miss a day, you can get back on get back to it. But just being able to step back and say, I can control some of my time. I
hmm
obviously I have obligations to other people. I have to attend meetings, but where can I find the time and control it? And that comes honestly from personal experience of having put everyone else's needs first. When I used to run a nonprofit for like 8 years, and before that, managed like 32 different locations for an organization, and I would put everyone else's needs first, and then at the end of the day, try to cram in the work that I needed to get done for myself. So I left
yeah.
myself open to those whims. And when I started flipping that, putting my work first, then I could get to it. But once I started to flip it and saw that how that worked, then I wanted to build on it. Then I wanted to share it. Um, you know, but I'm
This is
looking for
something
people to tell me what works for them. Um,
I mean, just getting into like your personal day to day and workflow. This is something that I'm pretty fascinated with coaches, right? Because I'm not a coach. I don't do coaching day to day. I'm a software guy, and so I really value my deep work time,
yeah.
and even like this call today. I have this and one other sales call today, and like that's two, I really don't want more than one call. Occasionally, I'll allow a second call
Yeah.
in my day,
Yep.
because there's just so much like personal energy that I'm expending just being on a call, right?
Yep.
And I really value just the quiet, focused music on, working on the product, um, and I need hours of that.
Yes.
So I'm kind of curious. Like with coaches, obviously, it's a very different thing. It's like how does it logistically actually work for you in terms of like calls, like one-to-ones, group calls in a day or in a week, and kind of managing your own energy and focus and all that.
Uh, so I try to limit the number of calls I'll have in the day. Three is about as much as I want to do, and
Mm-hmm.
part of that is because I like to spend where you're building the features. I tend to spend time writing, so
Mm-hmm.
I'm also an author and I'm writing that newsletter every week, and
Right.
it's been the source of most of my revenue for years and years and referrals. So I like to continue, and it's something I just love to do. So that's I have to spend time marketing and just the administrative side of the business. There's lots of little projects to do, outreach, but the day to day calls, I really like to keep them limited, and I generally leave at least 15 minutes on either side of my call
Mm-hmm.
as a I need to let go. You mentioned deep work. Like there is residual attention that I'm going to carry into the next call if I jump from one client to the next. I'm not going to have
Right.
time to let it go and prepare. So I like to leave at least 15 minutes, ideally, even more if I can, but it doesn't always work that way. But I put these buffers in honestly for the client because I won't be effective for them and listen to them if I can't let go of the prior call, write off some notes, get that out of my head, get up, stretch, take a break, get water, something,
Yep.
and then I can come back and review their notes for where we left
Mm-hmm.
off last time, and then get back on and give them my full attention. But that is something that's very important to me, is not splitting my attention, something I've also learned about myself. And part of that,
Yeah.
leaving yourself open, you know, in the past when I was managing, I wanted to be the open door manager, always
Mm-hmm.
available. Someone would come in, and if I'm working on something and I feel compelled to say, sure, have a seat, but I'm never giving either of those things my full attention. So I started to say no to them, wrap whatever's going, wrap up that, and then switch to them so that I can give them my full attention. And that's what it's always
Yeah.
about. Even as a parent, I do that with my kids sometimes. If
Totally.
they're coming at me, with a need, I would very clearly say, I love you. I want to hear everything that you have to say. Let me finish this, and then I can switch and give you my full attention because it's clearly what you're saying is really important, and I want to hear it.
Yeah. 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 And I mean, right now with summer and the kids are sort of like home, and that's like it's nice to have that structure where it's like, okay, I know this is my work time, so
Yeah,
I better make the focus count, right?
yeah,
Um, I don't want to go too long here. I did want to just sort of touch on, we talked about how you work. Maybe going back, like we don't need the whole career story here, but were there any like intentional changes or improvements that you've made in your approach to coaching or structuring the way that you offer your coaching? Whether it's improvements for you professionally or personally, or for results for your clients. Yeah, anything like come to mind over the last few years that like, before you were doing it this way and now you've made these changes and it's been really a lot better.
uh, a couple things. I used to do uh, 3 month engagements, and I would do 3 weeks on, 1 week off. And the way that I always said was, we need a week off so that we can get work done. We need to
Mm-hmm.
take a break because every week it's a little, almost incessant. Just. Uh, but I made this, and so I would do 3 month engagements. And at the time, I would also offer the opportunity for them to pay everything up front for a little bit of a discount. I felt like that would entice them. And I switched to a 6 month engagement every other week and only month to month. The reason why on the coaching side is that I started to find that people didn't have enough time to put in the work between
Mm-hmm.
calls on a week to week engagement. I just don't think, just so much happens. So many things come up, so many demands on our time. And you need at least 2 weeks between calls. That's
Yeah, and
normal.
I also find that like even though so much happens, also like not enough happens in one week,
Yeah. Oh, exactly.
right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
like I do a podcast with my friend Jordan where we're just talking about our progress, and if we record 2 weeks straight, it's like we don't have a lot of new content to talk about.
Yep.
you
And,
know?
and you're absolutely right. So yes, too much and not enough, all at the same time. So
Mm-hmm.
they come into the call with not enough having happened on what we were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the coaching side, and I feel like the rhythm is so much better. I also leave it a little open. If something comes up, I let people reschedule. I'm not a hard, must be every Tuesday at 10 kind of person. Like I like to leave, we'll find a time, we'll make it work. And then on the no more upfront payment, just having the recurring revenue. Coaching is a weird thing, and getting referrals, getting clients in, having to go find ways to get new clients. I mean, it's a little easier for me now that I've been doing it so long, and for a number of reasons, getting referrals and having the newsletter. But man, the ups and downs of that income as a solo business owner, it's hard to manage sometimes.
Yeah.
And you have to be really disciplined in the boom times, and so that
Yeah.
when things are down, it's you have something to coast on. So that spread it out a little bit to say, okay, I've got 6 months to make this work.
And I can see that's also like a predictable expense for the client to sort
Exactly.
of have like a monthly. It's just part of the budget.
Yep, it's predictable. And I'm very clear about how it works, and I don't limit it to six. I just say that that's the minimum, and then it's an auto pay. So they would say at the end, like, okay, we're done. Or
Yeah.
I've had clients that continued on, and I've been working with some of the same clients for years, just throughout lots of career changes, and just helping them think through whatever next step is facing them.
Yeah. And then how is it actually structured? You mentioned
Oh, sorry.
calls. Did you say like once every 2 weeks
Yeah, every two
is
weeks
is
it's
a
an
call?
hour long session. And it's another very clear change. I say up to 60 minutes is one
Okay.
session, because it used to be that I would feel bad, like if we'd get a lot done, maybe 30, 35 minutes, and I would say, gosh, it feels like this is a good place to start. What do you think? Stop. We can do another half hour later. I felt obligated to give them that,
Hmm.
but they're not paying for the time. They're paying for the result of the session. And so
Hmm.
that clarified that for me. And just so at one session, they could walk away with everything that they needed in 40 minutes. And I leave it up to them, of course, to make the decision. Do you have anything else? This seems like a good place to stop. Um, you've got a lot that we've just decided. Is there anything else that you want to talk about, or do you want to? Is this good? Where and it's all up to them though. And
And is there any like group interaction with other clients, or
no,
that's all one to one?
it's all one to one. The group that I run is a mastermind group, and there usually isn't a whole lot of crossover in terms of clients. But that's it.
Got it. Like two very separate tracks.
Exactly. It's also small business owners, mostly solopreneurs, quite frankly,
Hmm.
and just generally being supportive. You came in and spoke at one point, because there were a bunch of
Hmm.
coaches in there, and also I think people who could benefit from async communication and the way that Clarity
Yeah.
Flow does it. So
That's great. Well, Rob, I mean, we could talk all day. Again, like you unpacked like so many little nuances as a business owner and a team communicator. There's just so much here. So great to talk to you again at some point. Maybe have you back and unpack something else in more detail.
yeah, I would love to come back. I appreciate the opportunity to chat, and maybe in September I've got a new book coming out called Success Frames in not September, in December of this year, and basically
Okay. I
focusing
mean,
on.
we should have talked more about that,
No,
but
well,
we we will definitely get it all linked up. So
yeah,
actually, can you tell us like give us a quick
it,
title what it's about?
it's really anchored in what we were discussing before about anchoring people in their success and building the framework that they can use, for in lots of different scenarios. So really looking at, not just your strengths in the way that, an assessment might find your strengths, but looking at what you've actually accomplished, what works for you, how do you structure your time, how do you make decisions, and creating a framework that you can use over and over again. I honestly believe we learn more from our success than we do our failure. It gives us something to
Mm,
build on. Failures kind of tell us what not to do, which is great, but success gives us, a model that works directly for us.
yeah,
So that's
I
the
love it.
premise.
Kind of double down on what works.
Yep.
What's the title?
Success frames.
Success Frames.
Yep.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll get it all linked up. And are you publishing it, self-publishing it? Is
I'm
that
working with a publisher. I published a previous book called Attention: The Power of Simple Decisions in a Distracted World a couple years ago with Practical Inspirations Publishing, and that was successful, and they invited me back and publishing this one as well. So
amazing? Well, congratulations on that. I'm
thanks.
excited. Well, Rob, this has been great. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thanks for inviting me, Brian. Good to talk to you.